everyone, and welcome to the White Solidarity with Black Power live show, which is sponsored by the African People's Solidarity Committee. Today, we are discussing a very serious situation where the United States is threatening Russia with war around the question of the Ukraine. What's really happening from an African internationalist point of view? My name is Hallie Murray. I'm in St. Louis, Missouri right now, and I'm the Midwest regional organizer of the African People's Solidarity Committee. And I really just want to welcome you to this event. Please say where you're tuning in from in the chat. We have a very special guest with us tonight, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party and leader of the African Nation, who has spoken in Russia on several occasions at the request of various Russian organizations. Chairman Omali has also written a great deal of analysis about the former Soviet Union and Russia, and is an expert in the realm of geopolitics. Tonight's event is sponsored by the African People's Solidarity Committee, APSC, which is an organization of white people that was created by and works under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, of more than 40 years old, as part of the overall strategy for the liberation of African people. So Chairman Omali Yeshitela is also our leadership, and we salute him profoundly. Uhuru, Chairman, we're so honored to have you here. We also want to welcome Penny Hess, who is chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, and also Jesse Nevel, who is chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. Both organizations are under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. So before we get started, if you're tuning in on YouTube, please make sure to like and subscribe our page to get alerts whenever we go live or post a new video. This analysis tonight is, this is analysis you can only get right here, understanding the world through the eyes of the African working class. It's called African Internationalism, is the theory we'll be talking about tonight. So let's get this started. If you're tuning in on Facebook, please share this live stream with your friends. Also, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from, say your city, and any messages. We will have a question and answer period at the end of the discussion, so please stick around for that. Put your questions in the comments. We have some moderators who will be letting us know what you're thinking about. And I just also want to say the work of the African People's Solidarity Committee is to raise reparations from the white community to fund the incredible work of the African People's Socialist Party, including the amazing Black Power Blueprint Project, which is right here in St. Louis on the north side. Part of the Black Power Blueprint is the new Uhuru Solidarity Center. This is a new building located at 2654 Gravois Ave in South St. Louis. This building is owned by the African People's Socialist Party, and we in the Solidarity Movement have been given use of this beautiful building as a Solidarity Center with the sign Unity Through Reparations to the African community. Tonight, APSC is raising resources for the expenses of the party's Solidarity Center within the white community of St. Louis, which is very historic. So tonight we are raising funds for this building to do our various renovations and event programming. Our goal tonight is $500, and you can go to apscuhuru.org/donate to contribute right now. So help us meet our goal, apscuhuru.org/donate, and we will show you some photos a little bit later to learn about what you're contributing to. So again, I just want to salute our leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who developed the political theory of African internationalism and who represents the leadership of the African Revolution around the world, Uhuru, Chairman. We also, of course, want to salute Deputy Chair Onazane Yeshitela, who has put Chairman Omali Yeshitela's vision of the Black Power Blueprint on the ground in St. Louis and around the world. She leads more than 50 economic institutions of the party. So let's get started with our discussion tonight. Welcome, Chairwoman Penny Hess and Chair Jesse Nevel. I'm going to turn it over to you, Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairwoman Penny, I think you're on mute.
Uhuru, thank you, Hallie, Uhuru, Jesse. And I just really want to say what an incredible honor to have you, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, on this show with us tonight. And, you know, just so much to say and to talk to you about. I want to welcome everybody who's coming on to this really profound analysis that will be from an African internationalist point of view, from the work that Chairman Omali Yeshitela has done for over 30, 40 years in terms of the question of the former Soviet Union and and Russia. And we're going to talk about that tonight. I want to salute the chairman, 50 years of relentless fight, working, struggling for the liberation of Africa and African people everywhere, and to acknowledge Chairman as the leader of the African nation and the work of the African People's Socialist Party, keeping the struggle, the anti-colonial struggle alive for the last 40, 50 years. And I want to salute Deputy Chair Omali Yeshitela, who is the architect of the Black Power Blueprint, who has put this on the ground, and under whose direct leadership we in the African People's Solidarity Committee have the honor of working. And that the African People's Solidarity Committee, again, is an organization of white people formed by the African People's Socialist Party to extend the African revolution behind enemy lines into the white population, working for reparations to African people. And I also want to salute Benjamin Prado from Unión del Barrio, who is on tonight. Uhuru, great honor to have you here tonight, Benjamin. And Chairman, thank you so much for coming on. Again, it's a great honor to have you here with us. And I think that one of the things that we're going to be talking about from the very beginning is your analysis of colonialism as the mode of production of the social system that we live in today. Your understandings from so many years that capitalism is born of colonialism, that capitalism is parasitic, it's born on the assault on Africa, the kidnapping of African human beings, and the stolen labor, stolen humanity, stolen genius of African people, as well as stolen African land and resources, which continues today on the stolen land of the indigenous people, where popular genocide has been carried out against the indigenous people and the colonial domination of the majority of the people on the planet Earth. This is your understanding that colonialism exists here inside the United States, and it defines, as you had said, the entire political configuration of the world today. And so before we start a discussion with you, Chairman, tonight we would like to just put out a little bit of what is happening. And certainly we want to start with solidarity with the people of Russia and their elected government, and and to acknowledge that that in the Second Imperialist War, Germany, which was called Nazi Germany at the time, backed by the United States, who was completely complicit with that, committed genocide against the Russian people or in the Soviet Union by killing, with a conscious policy, up to 27 million people. And yet still the Soviets fought back and defeated the armies of Hitler in a really heroic struggle, even though they were being starved and freezing to death and being openly murdered by with the complicity of the United States government. And so in this current situation, and I'm just going to say a little bit about what's happening right now, after decades of provocation by the United States and NATO, the US is pushing Russia into war and imposing deadly sanctions on the country as Russia allegedly sends peacekeepers into the Donetsk region of Ukraine, which Russia officially recognized as their territory, which it is, and territory which was essentially stolen from them by the US. And the US is treating this as an invasion. And as of yesterday, the US has won a, quote, hitherto somewhat reluctant Germany, unquote, to halt Russia's Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline that, according to Reuters, is worth $11 billion. And it was finished in September, but it has stood idle pending certification by Germany and the European Union. And it's something that the US very much has not wanted to see go online. And this pipeline has been set to supposedly ease the pressure on European consumers facing record energy prices amid a wider post-pandemic cost of living crisis, and on governments that have already forked out billions of dollars to try to cushion the impact on consumers. And this is according to Reuters. Russia supplies Germany with half its natural gas supply. The US has long opposed this pipeline and Germany's dependence on Russian gas. So, this follows a wave of US-backed, quote, color revolutions, or the CIA, dirty ops that it does to colonize countries, in particular around the world, overthrowing neo-colonialists and people that are not following or towing the US line at any given time, or for whatever reason the US would want to do that. And, throughout the territories of the former Soviet Union, there was the Rose Revolution in Georgia in 2003, the Orange Revolution in Ukraine in 2004, the Tulip Revolution in Kyrgyzstan in 2005, or even the Arab Spring in Asia and Africa in 2011, and many other counterinsurgencies against anti-colonial movements and countries and struggles for independence around the world historically and inside the US as part of what Chairman Omali Yeshitela has termed the colonial mode of production. In 2014, the US-backed coup that ousted Ukraine's elected president, Viktor Yanukovych, who had a relationship with Russia, and replaced him with a reactionary white nationalist government of Volodymyr Zelensky, who's a former professional comedian who is tied to paramilitary, anti-Russian, pro-US neo-Nazi groups. And the New York Times this morning wrote, or a couple of days ago actually, wrote that the former comedian is in over his head. And as the chairman has suggested, that others pull the strings for that, for him and for that. And I think that, there's been this thing that this was a fascist government, but the main point about it is that, as the chairman has said, that what is called fascist is things that white people see that resemble the terror that colonized peoples experience every single day under US imperialism. And that one of the things that has resulted from the current Zelensky government in Ukraine is far more attacks on the Romani people, on Africans from the continent, and Arab peoples. These terrorist kinds of attacks on many people living in Ukraine right now have increased enormously. So the current situation has an alleged buildup of Russian troops of about 190,000 troops. And it comes after years of NATO encroachments, US CIA coups, color revolution, slander, and US sanctions, ongoing since the fall of the USSR in 1991, something also engineered by the US during the 1980s with the US-backed coup in Afghanistan on the Soviet border. And in fact, most people don't know this, but in the 1970s, there was the most progressive government in the Middle East was the government of Afghanistan. And it's where women had full rights, were leaders, could go to universities, but the US, but they had a relationship with the Soviet Union, and the US created a counterinsurgency and US-backed proxy forces to go in to overthrow that government. And that, just to say, and now of course we've all read that the US very shabbily withdrew from Afghanistan after after 20 years of occupation, and that today 95% of the people of Afghanistan are starving, babies are dying, and this is the result of the US colonial occupation for over 20 years. So since 1991, the US has worked to contain Russia. According to one online source, since the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, the NATO military alliance has extended its borders 800 miles to the east, incorporating Poland, Hungary, Czechia, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Croatia, Montenegro, and North Macedonia. In 2021, NATO officially recognized Ukraine itself as an aspiring member, and Sweden and Finland are also considering joining the anti-Russian alliance, and both of them are on the border of Russia. Both Finland and Estonia are less than 200 kilometers, 125 miles from St. Petersburg, one of the major cities of Russia, and Ukraine's eastern border is less than 750 miles or 465 miles from Moscow. So while the US and European powers are denouncing Russia for alleged troop movements within its own borders, billions of dollars in arms have been supplied by the US to these Baltic states of Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, which are now being shipped to Ukraine. And the US already has more than 150 military advisors in Ukraine, including special operation forces, joining advisors from the UK, Canada, Lithuania, and Poland. So the US is threatening a war that would now affect Europeans instead of its usual colonial targets. And even Ukrainian President Zelensky has charged repeatedly that the US is blowing this out of the water, and has said that repeatedly again, and making it a far bigger issue. In January, the UK Guardian reported Ukraine's President Zelensky has talked down the threat of an imminent Russian invasion and said the UK and US are wrong to pull out non-essential diplomatic staff from Kyiv, adding, "We don't have a Titanic here." Zelensky said last Friday he was acutely aware of the dangers posed by the 100,000 Russian troops gathered on Ukraine's border, but he appeared to disagree with Biden administration's bleak assessment that a Russian attack next month was distinctly possible. And a recent article on Information Clearinghouse stated Ukraine has already been massively weaponized by the United States since the CIA-backed coup d'etat in Kyiv in 2014 brought to power a neo-Nazi regime obsessed with antagonizing Russia. And I would say, and that's a quote, but of course it's created to threaten the Russian government. And the Biden administration has boosted inventories for anti-tank missiles and other lethal weaponry with plans for further increases. Now it emerges that additional supplies are on the way from both the US and Britain. Britain is to send anti-tank weapons to Ukraine along with, quote, military advisors. So I'm gonna stop here because I want to get input from you, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and I want to ask you, just many questions about the history, about all of the writing and analysis that you have done on the situation. But I wanted to start, Chairman, with this understanding that a lot of white people, which you have defined as the colonizer, this dialectic between the colonizer and the colonized, and that a lot of white people put the struggle of African people as in some kind of isolated box, and that see it as conveniently want to see it as a problem simply of African people in the US. And you have given us this profound analysis of the world and the world economy that you have termed again as colonialism as the means of production. And you say that this means there is a dialectic in this world that connects the whole world, which means that there's no greater authority on the world situation than you, an African internationalist who can see this reality of how the world got to be the way it is. So, you have written, Chairman, through African internationalism, you said, we were able to reveal the fact that the oppressive conditions faced by Africa, Africans, and the majority of the peoples of the world are globally connected to the experience of affluence and power by the white population that is dependent on a pedestal of colonial domination. African internationalism connects the current political and economic configuration of the world to the colonial enslavement of Africa and African people. It proves that capitalism emerged as a parasitic world economy born at the expense of Africa, Africans, and all the world's peoples who are subjected to foreign and alien colonial rule up into this date. So, Chairman, please talk to us about this dialectic and as it relates to the situation of the current U.S. assault on the people and government of Russia.
Uhuru, thank you, Comrade Chairwoman Penny Hess, Comrade Jesse, Comrade Hallie, all of you who are responsible for conducting this important webinar. I also want to extend greetings to Comrade Benjamin Prado from Union de Barrio, who is also on this meeting with us. We are up against something that most white people, most Europeans, including those in the United States, have difficulty grasping, in part because, as we said before, you talk about the colonizer defines reality, defines the world with the guns. You can't whistle at a white woman without dying. You can't say anything or do anything without facing the horrible consequences from this colonial master that has imposed itself on the world. And it has assumed it will be able to do this forever, but it won't. And the fact is that things are changing now. And so we've had a situation for the longest period of time, especially in the United States, probably the most politically backwards and deadly, dangerous force on the earth, and perhaps in the history of the earth, that you have the colonizer who has been the subjects of history, and the rest of us have been the objects of history. And what has happened is that we haven't been permitted to talk. We've been chained, bound, and threatened, beaten, garroted, just the whole thing to even say something, and which makes it, just incredible to listen to the garbage coming from this white man in the White House, Biden, who crept upon, stumbled upon, staggered upon this whole notion that he wants to have a confrontation with Russia. You may remember that Biden initially was saying that if Russia just attacked a little bit, it'll be all right, but they can't attack Ukraine a lot. I don't know if anybody remembers that. And he called hell for having made that kind of statement. So saying something about, there won't be sanctions if it's only a little attack or a small attack or a minor attack, but if it gets a big attack, a big invasion, something to that effect. And that roiled all kinds of forces when he made that statement. But here's what we have. We have a world, the whole world, the economic and political configuration of the whole world rests upon a foundation, a base of colonial slavery and domination. That's why the vast majority of the people on earth suffer without clean water, without lights, without anything that white people, the colonizer, takes for granted. And because the colonizer has power, has all the power, generally speaking, up until now, and this is the thing that's threatening the entire situation now, that there's a loss of power within the context of the existing structure of imperial domination, colonial rule. There's this uneasy equilibrium. This thing is being shaken to its very foundation, and that's part of what it is we're looking at. So Biden now has decided that Ukraine is the problem, and this was despite the fact that it took weeks to convince the Ukrainians themselves, or the people who live in Ukraine, that Russia was a problem, that Russia was going to threaten them. In fact, they pushed back for a long time. As you said, Zelensky, who I don't think was the person who replaced the person who was overthrown by coup. I think somebody else came first, and then Zelensky, the comedian, is the one who replaced him. But refused for the longest period of time to say that Russia was going to attack. And I also want to remind us that this is a very one-sided discussion that we are seeing and hearing. We don't hear the discussion that's coming from the Kremlin. We don't hear the discussion that's coming from Russia, from the Russians, and how they're articulating this reality, except there was recently a presentation that was made by President Putin, who, with some kind of accuracy, talked about how this whole historical relationship between Ukraine and Russia, that Lenin, he said, gave this entity that they're talking about to what is now characterized as Ukraine, and certainly Stalin facilitated that, and especially after the Second Imperialist World War. And the Russians gave up blood, sacrificed treasure, a whole bunch of other things in order to for the development of this entity that's Ukraine. So that did happen, and so now we have Zelensky moving closer to a position that's being pushed by the United States. What is the situation? The situation is that for everybody to see the declining power of the United States. There's no doubt about that. People have been seeing that all along. And the United States has been losing influence in the whole world. Two of the outstanding states that's challenged the hegemony of the United States have been Russia and China. These are two of the outstanding states, but they are losing influence and authority in a lot of other places. That includes Venezuela. People, you talk about how people don't want to connect Africa and African people to this situation. There's this ability for the settlers, for the colonizers, to talk about Ukraine as if it were separate from what is happening in Venezuela, which is an ongoing decline in U.S. power and white power, and so-called Western colonial power is on a state of decline, and that's something that cannot be denied. One, two, and to the extent that at the Munich Security Council in 2020, they were talking about a state of, this is before this so-called threat to Ukraine from Russia. They were talking about the approaching Westlessness, how the West was disappearing, how the colonial powers of Europe were diminishing in terms of influence, authority, etc. This is what, and this was the Munich Security Council conference is something that happens annually, and hundreds of thinking representatives of white power, the colonial colonizers and their minions and others attend these conferences every year. They are saying this. Zuckerberg was there, the one who don't let us on Facebook, and now he wants to condemn Russia or some other entity. Zuckerberg was there, and they're struggling with this whole issue of Westlessness. And we're talking about now the decline of the U.S., and we're talking about the decline of white power, generally speaking, certainly of colonial white power. This is what is happening here. So you have that. You have the despair of the Democratic Party, or that sector of the ruling class, tied to Biden, because you can't say it's the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party, if you look at the demographics of it, 25% of it's African. I don't know how many other colonized people are attached to it, trying to find our way through that entity in the face of the so-called white party, which is the Republican Party, which is obviously whiter, but it strategically it pursues its interests in one way, and the Democratic entity pursues it fight for white power in another way by mobilizing the colonizers, a form of neo-colonialism internalized that immobilized the colonized people to fight for imperialism in the name of some kind of democracy as against the other group of colonizers who are supposed to be like fascists and other things like that. And the outcome of any of this, none of this results in the freedom of African people or the people any place on the planet Earth. And now there's common cause, you can see, generally speaking, within sectors of the rulers in this country about Ukraine and a willingness to do something to Russia as a consequence of the so-called encroachment in Ukraine. Now, something may happen there, but it hasn't happened. And everything we've heard now has been BS. It's been promoted. It's been wagging the dog, more or less, is what we've been seeing. Now, here you have Biden, whose poll numbers have been plummeting, and they're decrying that. They're saying what's going to happen in the midterm elections. Trump is going to come back, and he's in the wings. Don't forget that. Trump is in the wings, and that sector of the colonizer in the wings, ready, and by 2024, they're talking about a possible coup. Not a coup in Ukraine, or not a coup in Russia, but in the United States. This is what's being discussed right now. So here you have Biden, you have the crisis of the whole restlessness possibility. You have the inability up to now of the United States to keep all of the so-called Western partners in line with them, especially as China, Russia growing in influence, et-cetera. And then you have Biden, whose political career is threatened, and everybody connected to Biden, they see their future going down the drain too. Their polling numbers are horrible. So typically, what they do is find something else that unites them and makes the enemy divert attention from their contradiction and create this other kind of contradiction. And so there's this external enemy now that threatens all civilized white people in the world, and all the civilized white people have to get together now to protect themselves from the Russians. This is a common ploy. When the Lewinsky thing happened with Clinton, he bombed a pharmaceutical company in Sudan. We've seen this kind of thing happen typically to detract from the contradictions that these terrible entities have that they're confronted with themselves. And so now France typically was one of the last to come on board with this, the Russians gambit, and had set itself out to be the great diplomat who would visit Putin and visit Zelensky and pull it all together. Now France has joined this cry and this BS of saying, all the French, get out of Ukraine right away because there's going to be this attack. And so this whole sense of urgent, desperate problems is being promoted. And so it's possible that Russia will attack. It would make sense if it did attack, just in the sense that you can't act like this, that Ukraine is some kind of benign entity that's right next to Russia anymore. You can see the whole history. From 1917, more than 100 years of aggression that's been pushed against Russia in some iteration or another. When it was the Soviet Union, it was invaded. The United States was a part of the invasion. And so all of this struggle has been going on. Then to the whole Cold War, they swore they were fighting against the communists in Russia, et cetera, but they didn't throw a brick at the communists. They didn't spit at the Russians. All of the war that they were engaged in was so-called Cold War that happened in Africa. It happened in the Americas and other places like that, because the colonial question always was the fundamental question. And the question was, who was going to get those resources in Africa, who was going to be able to control those resources in Asia and in the Americas, et cetera, and the so-called West, and particularly under the leadership of the United States, was determined to do that. And so that's what we're looking at right now. And the question of Black people, Africa is central to it because it's central to the existence, to the founding and the continuing existence of a colonial mode of production. This whole system got its beginning, got its origin in colonial slavery and the extension of colonialism around the world that has now become the foundation upon which all of the political and economic activity that we are talking about occurs. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you. Very powerful and just really profound, Chairman. And I wanted to turn it over to Comrade Jesse, who's going to talk to you a little bit more.
Uhuru, Chairman and Chairwoman Penny. Yeah, this has been an incredible discussion already, and it's really an honor to have you here, Chairman. And this hysteria that you just described as the Russia gambit has been going on for a long time. Even in recent political history, we've been hearing about Russia and Ukraine, even throughout the Trump years, constantly. First, this whole idea that Trump was a Russian agent, and then even Trump's impeachment trial, which revolved around the allegation that he had withheld military aid to Ukraine in order to pressure them into providing him with intel about Joe Biden's son's, corrupt and nefarious activities in Ukraine. That was the grounds for the impeachment. And during that era, you wrote very, very insightfully about what was going on with Trump and Russia and Ukraine in the political report that was then published as the book Vanguard, The Advanced Attachment of the African Revolution. And you talked about what you refer to as the Atlanticists, or the Atlanticist bloc, and how Trump represented a rupture or a deviation from the Atlanticist arrangement. And you actually mentioned by name NATO, saying that the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was the most obvious political and military manifestation of the Atlantic bloc. And of course, Chairwoman Penny was reading earlier all of the various places surrounding Russia and Eastern Europe where NATO has established a presence and incorporated those former Soviet republics into the Atlanticist bloc. So could you talk about what is this whole concept of the Atlanticists, and what relationship, what significance does this have to what's going on right now with Russia and Ukraine?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And because with the success of the Russian Revolution, the whole threat of the idea of the workers taking over and taking power and kicking these filthy predators who got everything they got from slavery and colonialism and runs the world, keeps war always happening. This whole thing was threatened. And so here you have the Russian Revolution that was done in the name of the workers of the world. All the workers of the world, we're going to take down this system of the rich and put power into the hands of the producers, the workers of the world. They got it wrong in terms of how they define the workers and the producers ultimately, and how they understood, the origin of the social system. But it was scary as hell to these guys. Penny mentioned earlier how during the Second Imperialist World War, how the United States and the so-called Western entities, they set Russia up. The Soviet Union, they withheld any kind of support and what have you, and their objective was to let Russia, let the Soviets and the Nazis kill each other off or weaken themselves off, and then the U.S. comes out as top dog. And this is the nice guys we are talking about. We're talking about now, Comrade Jesse just mentioned how this Ukrainian question and the Trump issue, et cetera, and we're talking about a weakened U.S. imperialism. We're talking about an imperialism that's trying to define itself in a way that it can get some traction and hold on to masses of people in the United States and around the world, that's just defined itself as the democracy, and then China and Russia as the autocracies, and the world is split between autocrats and democrats, and of course the United States, which is founded on the graves, the slaughter of millions and millions and millions of indigenous people here, and the captivity and forced enslaved labor of Africans. It's the democracy. And China, who as far as I know, never enslaved people, and Russia, as far as I know, they went through the whole feudal thing, but never enslaved people. These are the countries that's the autocracies. And so this is how they've defined the world now, to try to climb out of this station that they are located in right now. And they've been trying to get out of it for a long time. And now the Biden administration is custodian of the worst expectations of the social system itself. So this is part of what defines this particular reality, and how the Biden administration and the rest of them are trying to move and trying to get out of it. But it is a colonial mode of production. It is a mode of production that the whole world is locked into, whether you ever been to Africa or not, whether you've ever been to Mexico or not. The fact is that the pedestal for all of the economic activity in the world, that for the emergence of this thing that we call capitalism, the pedestal of that, the thing that changed the world from just the world of individual countries and worlds, a number of worlds in casual relationship to each other, the thing that changed all of that, that brought it all together, was colonialism. It was the colonialism that hooked the entire world up, from Africa all the way up, and then Europeans now sit on top of that world and administer that through the ruling class, through the European ruling class. So everything that happens from that basis. And the other question that you were raising, Comrade, the aspects of that, Comrade Jesse, what was another aspect of that you were raising? What was the essence of that?
The question of the Atlanticists.
And so here's what you had, is that right after the Second Imperialist World War, like the First Imperialist World War, the Treaty of Versailles is the one that responsible for the advent of the League of Nations. Mm-hmm. The League of Nations was supposed to be this international entity that brought peace to the world, so that white people wouldn't have to fight each other anymore for the colonial resources. Except, and this was something that was put forth by President Woodrow Wilson, except the US Congress wouldn't go for it. So the League of Nations sort of withered out. And then at the end of the Second Imperialist World War, another bloody imperialist enterprise, millions of people are being killed everywhere. And like the First Imperialist World War, it was a war to redivide the world among these bandits, which is what's being happening now with this whole Russia, Ukraine, all that. Who's going to dominate the world? Who's going to get what part of the world? What entity will do that? And so the Second Imperialist World War, they came up with the United Nations, and this got traction. It's stuck. But you know, it's a very undemocratic thing that they created with a handful of people who are the Security Council, who can veto anything. And initially, that was essentially a white thing. And then it gives ability for everybody to talk, but this handful of Security Council are the ones who dominate and say what's going to happen in the world. And then then there was the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. All of this is a part of the Atlanticist movement, and Europeans and colonizers around the world participated. This was a new bloc. This was how this ruling elite bloc established itself and functioned through the Atlanticist, this Atlanticist grouping. They created things like the World Trade Organization, various other kind of trade regulations. Most of the international law and what have you for a certain time came from this arrangement. So we had the Atlanticists, and they were the ones who had a relatively comfortable relationship, not without contradictions, not without hiccups, etc. But they are the ones who found a way to be able to moderate their own disagreements, in part and fundamental to much of what they was doing is containing the Soviet Union. So NATO was formed. It came into existence for the exact and specific purpose of containing the Soviet Union, so that there would not be any growth of a revolutionary workers movement in the world, and certainly not the Soviet Union. That's what NATO was formed for. And so, but after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the logic for NATO was no longer there, because again, it was there to contain the Soviet Union. There is no Soviet Union. So why the hell is there NATO now? It's there now because the fact is that the whole anti-Soviet thing they were doing in part was to contain the colonial resources of the world. They were in a contest in the Soviet Union, China. China wouldn't let them take Korea. China kept them out of China. China kept them from total domination of Asia and what have you. And then you got Russia, who was there also as a factor. So you have these forces who are contending with the colonial setup, and NATO was formed. It was created for that. China, Korea, the so-called tumbling dominoes of colonialism, they were intended, they were determined to keep that from happening. And so now the question, it became a shaky kind of enterprise. So Trump was in the first person who questioned the legitimacy of NATO. In fact, even Obama had begun the so-called Asian pivot and what have you, to the dismay of some of the Atlanticists. But Trump was able to move in a fashion that was different from most of them because he was not a part of the group. And he there were other interests who were trying to intervene in a very powerful way economically on the world scene. Trump may have had some kind of relationship with somebody in Russia or Russians. Another thing was trying to emerge in terms of economic movement and development in the world. And so he challenged the NATO situation, United Nations. He came in challenging the United Nations and NATO. And all of the liberals and leftists are fighting to protect the United Nations and protect NATO as if they were some kind of legitimate people's institutions. And when they were founded, the United Nations was founded for the purpose of peaceful collaboration among the colonizers to maintain domination of the world without having to have another war in order to make that happen. And so that's what this whole Atlanticist thing is. The Atlanticist thing has fractured. And in fact, you can call this as a part of the movement of Westlessness that threatened the Munich Security Conference that they were talking about in 2020. The Atlanticists, that is the so-called West that we're talking about, the Western colonizers and what you're talking about. And everybody perceives the fact that that U.S. has not the power that it has had in the past, that Europe itself has not the power that it has had in the past. And because all U.S. and European power relied on what? On colonies, sucking the blood of the colonized peoples of the world. And the colonized peoples of the world are in motion, and we are in motion to take back Africa, every square inch of Africa, and people in Venezuela, throughout South America, Asia, everywhere. That's what this fight is about. And so it's not just a Venezuelan fight over here and then another fight with Ukraine over here. It's connected. It's a world connected together by a colonial capitalist economy. And it is in serious distress right now. But it's a dangerous situation as well, because with all of the bluster that you see, with all the movement of troops and military hardware that you see, with the flying on the borders, the U.S. military nuclear-powered, nuclear weaponized flights on the border of Russia, with the movement of these battleships and what have you, and the Pacific Asia region, the challenging China and what have you, and then blowing it up. And you got the industry, these munitions corporations who have an interest in making people scared and making war happen or possible. And there's blowing up and more resources now going to munitions and things like that. It's a very primitive and very hostile kind of political economy that we are looking at. And that's what colonial capitalism is. It's a hostile political economy. It's a blood-sucking political economy, and it has to go. Uhuru. And so the reason that that we are sympathetic or can be sympathetic to Russia is political, not moralistic. I don't know. I mean, Russia is a capitalist trying to be forge its way. It's different, and maybe we may get a chance to say some things about how Russia and China are different and how they are able to challenge the colonial mode of production in a way that we haven't seen happen like this before. But yeah, the thing is that the reason that we can be sympathetic to Russia is because it clearly represents a fracture in U.S. hegemony. It's a threat to U.S. hegemony, and it destabilizes the existing kind of political and economic arrangements that has dominated the world up to now. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. Uhuru, this is so profound. And a little bit ago, you were talking about how most white people have difficulty recognizing, seeing the world as it really is, and truly is impossible unless we are under the leadership of the African Revolution. And that the way that, as you've always said, that the colonizers have determined that we are the subjects of history and everybody else, the objects of history, have no first person, that is, and that we have unloaded and participated in the most vicious forms of violence against African people and the peoples on the planet Earth without ever blinking an eye, and yet holding ourselves up as the arbiters of, the moral high ground of the world. And that, that we have this opportunist white left that is really nothing more than the loyal opposition inside the system of colonialism as the mode of production, which is basically, it's there to point out the problems, maybe, that make white people uncomfortable, but it's never about overturning the system, that it has to go.
Not only is it not about overturning the system, Penny, I know you're going someplace else with that question, that intro, but not only is it not about overturning the system, it is about protecting the system. And that's why they would have us engage in this struggle against fascism, right? As opposed to colonialism, which is what the whole thing rests upon. And what they're saying is unite with me in this struggle that we're having with these other white guys who are trying to take over the colonial mode of production. They're not overturning the colonial mode of production. They're not overturning the system that Trump represents. They saying, put my guy in to dominate things as opposed to this guy. And so they want the Africans, the Mexicans, the indigenous peoples to throw down everything that we are doing. Stop. In fact, during the Second Imperialist World War, the whole position that came from the Communist International was this united front against fascism. So here, all of the colonized people who were subject to the leadership of the Communist International, that included people in Vietnam and other places around the world, were not supposed to engage in struggle against the French who were colonizing them in Vietnam, because we had to have this united front against fascism because the French were opposed to German fascism. And so we have this situation historically, that's been the issue. So not only do they not fight to overturn it. They fight to protect it.
Yes.
They fight to come up with a special category to deal with white people. Everybody else catching hell. You want to tell me about fascism? How the hell, 50 million indigenous people dead by the time of sometime in the by 1600 or something to that effect? Where's the fascism? Where's the fascism with all of the enslaved Africans? They never said this was fascism that's happening to Black people, to Mexicans, and et cetera, et cetera. Just fascism when white people are catching hell. And then they see, and some Africans and other colonized people fall victim to this nonsense too, because we haven't yet become African internationalists and captured control of our own brains and in our own worldview. And so we borrow from the colonizer, this the left colonizer. But in the last political report, we had these long articulations from the communists of the world who were talking about socialist colonialism and what have you. And that's what all of the leftists I know believe in, socialist colonialism, whether they say it or not. And into the whole movement is supposed to be a struggle for white rights, no matter what the hell is going on, fighting for white rights, white workers' rights, white homosexual rights, white trees rights, white whales rights, white fish rights, white any kind of thing that's going to keep secure white people, because the whole environment, the earth is being destroyed with the initial attack, assault on the earth, being with Africa and the colonized peoples of the world. And now everybody's supposed to wake up and protect the environment and protect the this and the that. Well, hell. Yeah. Wow. I know I took you off point, Comrade.
No, not at all, because this is the point. Just understanding this colonial mode of production, and that that you've talked about, this restlessness, this crisis of imperialism that you've written about, and you've called it the uneasy equilibrium in the world between the past and the future. And just say a little bit more about that, Chairman.
I want to say, Comrade Penny, getting to that, I think is important because something may happen in Ukraine. Because as you see the so-called West pumping all kinds of resources, guns, munitions, and so-called advisors into Ukraine. I was in the US Army when they were sending advisors into Vietnam. And what is happening is that they have the ability to use Ukraine as a dagger into the heart, to drive it into Russia and set off a response by the Russians to crush it and to crush this thing, and then use that as a means of justifying other kinds of actions that they want to unite the world against, Russia with. I think we should be aware of that. Why are they putting all these weapons in Ukraine? Why are they putting all the guns in Ukraine? Why are they screaming, everybody get out of Ukraine, creating this sense of hysteria and what have you? And then they can use Ukraine, like I said, as a dagger in the heart of Russia, drive it into Russia and what have you, this straight, into Russia. And of course, they would get a hot, response to that. So I wanted to say that. And what we have is, this situation that we've talked about, Comrade Penny, it's been a weakness of the traditional Marxist analysis that has talked about the various modes of production and how you have this sort of cascading process from what they refer to as primitive communism and to slavery and to feudalism into capitalism, et cetera. But the weakness of that has been not recognizing that colonialism is a mode of production. It's not just how Marx would have defined us as some kind of auxiliary that's significant to white people. That's how he called it primitive accumulation. He called turning Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of Black skins primitive accumulation. He called the war that China fought, that England fought with China, the Opium Wars, primitive accumulation. In other words, and when they say primitive accumulation, what that means is a primitive accumulation of capital for the emergence of capitalism as this white thing that happened in the world. And so we were like auxiliary forces, and so they missed it. They don't get it. They never got it. And what we're saying is that the real crux of the question, that we said that's why you could not even characterize the Russian Revolution as a socialist revolution in the sense that there was the historical basis for socialism had arrived. The historical basis for socialism had not arrived. It's just that the political condition had arisen for socialists to take power in Russia. So socialism, as Marx had talked about it, as Lenin had predicted, as Trotsky and all these, it wasn't there. And even Lenin said it with this new economic policy that he put forward, they never assumed it and said that this is not going to work unless there's revolution, socialist revolution in Germany and all these other places. So it didn't work. It was wrong. And it had to be wrong. And Ho Chi Minh had it right when he said at one of the meetings of the Communist International, the Third International, he said, you are looking for imperialism in Europe. When you look for imperialism in Europe, you only see the tail. He said the head of imperialism is in the colonies. He was right. And so it's the colonial question, and that's the thing that's shaking up the whole world today. That's why you see the US involved in a permanent state of warfare. That's why this whole tussle is happening. We're trying to define Russia and China, who encroaching upon the potential, the ongoing growth and control of the colonial resources of the world. And this is, and Africa, which is not even counted. There's nobody even considers Africa. That's their mistake. Because Africa is being reborn, even as we have this discussion. That's part of my job. That's the development of the African Revolution, because that's the fundamental key to overturn this social system. So we have this uneasy equilibrium that the arrangements that's been there for the longest period of time, holding this thing together, is on a shaky foundation. That's the foundation that is comprised of a colonial, oppressive colonial past, and the future of liberated people and the workers of the world, and certainly the African workers' revolution. So this is the uneasy equilibrium. This is what we're looking at, and increasingly you see efforts like this nonsense about the defining the world is divided between the democracies and the autocracies. Such nonsense, Right. I'm sure we're going to have more and more opportunity to talk about this moving forward. And I want to agree with you before you go to any further, come at Penny and come at Jesse, that people ought to give that $500 that you're talking about.
Yes, absolutely, Chairman Uhuru. So we're gonna have to wrap up, and then we are going to go into discussion. But Chairman, I mean, this is so profound. I just, I'm deeply moved by just the clarity that African internationalism brings us, enables us to see, and gets rid of, all the crap and puts it out the world as it really is, as it is experienced by the African working class and the majority of the people on the planet Earth. And everything else is part of being the subjects of history, truly. And we're gonna have some discussion in a minute, and shortly. But I do want to call on people, on white people, to recognize what Chairman Omali Yeshitela is saying and understand this thing about being the subject of history, of being the colonizer, and that the chairman has fought for the understanding. I'm telling you, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, nobody knew what the word reparations meant. Nobody knew or used the word colonialism. I was driving home tonight, Chairman, and on NPR radio were Indigenous people talking about colonialism, using that term and saying, and the woman was saying, because all these white people are now calling themselves Indigenous. And she's saying the colonizer, nobody wants to be the colonizer, admit they're colonizers anymore, but we are colonized. And our children are stolen, our land is stolen, our culture is stolen. Who put this out? You did. Yeah. You have fought for that for the last 50 years. And this is how the world is understanding this, that you can hear about colonialism inside the borders of the United States and pointing to white people as the settler colonizers on this land that belongs to the indigenous people, because you have fought for that. The African People's Socialist Party has put that out over and over and over again, and said that the struggle is not against racism. The struggle is against colonialism, just as an African on the continent of Africa is fighting against colonialism. African people, because they were brought here as property, are fighting against colonialism inside the false borders of the United States. And yeah, and I just, I
think maybe Putin heard too, Penny. You may have seen a recent discussion that he had. He was characterizing Ukraine as a colony. He was saying Ukraine is a colony of the West, of the U.S. and the West. So that's interesting.
Also, that you were invited, to Russia, and you have spoken there.
Yeah.
And spoken to some very august bodies there, and and that's a place. And I've heard many people around the world, when they hear you speak, they ask you to come to. The chairman was speaking to people. And there was a student from Vietnam, and she came up to the chairman in San Diego and said, "We need you in Vietnam now," and I've heard the Palestinians say that to you. And, and even people in Russia said, "We need you here, Chairman Omali Yeshitela." So yes, this analysis gives just incredible confidence and to everyone on the planet to suddenly, have the ability to see the world as it really is, and to understand, what you have done to elevate the, just the historic, importance and key significance of the African working class as the working class on the planet. So we have so much more that we could talk about, Chairman, and there always is. This is so profound, but what I love is the way you turn history right side up, and that you just put out these simple concepts, and everybody has to go, "Oh wow, that's so right." That can't be denied, that can't be fought against. So, I just really appreciate that, and I want to call on people, on white people, if you're not already a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, join, go to uhurusolidarity.org. You can also find out more about being in the African People's Solidarity Committee. And we're going to have Comrade Ruby's going to talk about this more, but I just want to join. We have to join the people of the planet. We have to rectify our position and our self-imposed isolation from the rest of the world, as Chairman Omali Yeshitela has said. And we have the ability to do that, but only under the leadership of the African working class. We can't do it sitting on the pedestal on the backs of everybody else. It's not possible. This is how we change our relationship to the world, and not be the hated subjects of history, and sitting in, on the stolen land of the indigenous people as the top imperialist power of the planet. So, Chairman, thank you. And we will be back in just a minute and talk some more with you. And everybody who has questions, please put them in the chat and other kinds of things. And so here's Hallie coming on to end with Uhuru, and thank you so much.
Uhuru coming, thank you.
Uhuru. Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Chair Penny Hess and Jesse, this was so powerful. Thank you so much, Chairman, for this on-point analysis of just what is going on in the world. That was really deep. I really personally appreciated that. I've been taking notes here, and we will be having a question and answer period shortly. There's been some great comments and questions coming in, so keep putting them in the chat, and as well as on Facebook and YouTube, just put them in the chat. We will get back to you on that. Before we get into our Q&A, we want to tell you how you can get involved in solidarity with African people's struggle for liberation. And right now, I'm excited to bring on Comrade Ruby to tell you more about that. Uhuru, Ruby.
Uhuru. Thank you so much, Hallie. And I just really want to echo what I so appreciate the analysis. Where else can you hear this truth and hear, the views of the African Revolution? And we want to call on people to donate. We want to raise that $500 today. That's a very, very low, very reasonable goal. And we want to we're raising the money in this event for the Uhuru Solidarity Center, for the expenses of the Uhuru Solidarity Center in St. Louis, which, as was said earlier, this is a building owned by the African People's Socialist Party that the African People's Solidarity Committee is responsible to develop and promote as a real tangible place in the world where people can find and join the movement for white people's reparations to the African community in St. Louis and beyond. It's the headquarters of the African People's Solidarity Committee in the US and around the world. And this is a really, really new and important institution that exists for white people to take a new kind of stand to rectify our 500-year relationship with the rest of humanity through reparations to African people. And we want to show you some pictures of this place. And this is the front of the building. On the left is what it looks like now, and on the right is a concept, with the new signage, unity through reparations. And we are going to be completing, it's going to look like this. It's going to look like the picture on the right by the end of the first quarter of this year. We've had 6 work days since November, and we've completed phase 1 of the renovations. Next slide. We have some beautiful before and after shots showing you, that's what it looked like before. Now we put that gorgeous red floor and the black trim, and it is so fresh and beautiful. We want this place to be the best because this is for reparations to African people. Whoops, hold on a second. This is a view looking out of the front onto Gravois Avenue. We're going to be getting curtains, and we're going to paint the Congo design in the arc above the windows. This is another view of the main room, and we're going to use this area to build a storefront for Uhuru Planet, which you can see on display, and that is where we're also selling the other Buy Black Power products. And this work was possible because of our amazing volunteers. We're going to show a few quick pictures of volunteers coming out and doing the work to transform this building. And we've already held events there. We've had a potluck, we've had political education, and we've increased sales for Uhuru Planet reparations apparel. We've created a space for live broadcasts like this one. And here's another view of the Planet Uhuru space. And we want to call on everybody. We've already raised $150. We have $350 remaining of the goal. I am going to donate another $35. So we are at we have 185 contributed. So we only need $315 now. We really want to urge everybody to donate today. And I want to thank Leah in Minneapolis, Maureen in Oakland, Lisa in Minneapolis, Penny in St. Louis. And you go to donate. It's pinned in the chat where you donate. And we're going to keep announcing new contributions throughout the rest of tonight's program. But this is an institution. We need to build it in St. Louis. Then we need to build it in Philadelphia. We need to build it in California. We need to build the movement for white people's reparations to the African community as a real contending thing to the kind of colonial economy that exists, that has been so eloquently spoken about today. So here's where you go to donate, APSC uhuru.org/donate. And I also want to say, as Penny said, we want to call on people right now to join the African People's Solidarity Committee. This is the organization that was founded by Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party to work directly under the leadership of the African Revolution, to tell the truth, to take full responsibility to stop the violence and war of colonialism and win reparations and rectify the last 500 years of genocide committed by our European and American ancestors, and that we directly benefit from today. We're turning this around under the leadership of the African Revolution. Joining APSC is how we can do that from the white community. And go to apscuhuru.org/join, fill out the form, and somebody from the membership office will contact you within 24 hours. We can get started on the new membership process right away. That includes political education, getting to work, contributing your skills and strengths to our mission of winning millions of dollars in reparations to the African liberation struggle, and building a huge, strong movement of white solidarity with Black power under the leadership of the African Revolution and the African People's Socialist Party. This is the time to bring the resources stolen from African people back to the African Revolution. Join today. Okay, we have $165 to go. We've raised some more money. We have now raised, Jesse did $30. Okay, so we have raised $335. So all we need is $165. We can do that tonight. Benjamin just did $50 donation. Excellent. That's fantastic. Okay, well, just keep those donations coming. You don't have to do 50 though. You can do 5, 10, whatever you can do. But if you can do 50, do 50, do 100. This is where the future is being built. All right. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it back over to Hallie. Uhuru.
Uhuru Ruby, thank you so much for that exciting appeal. And everyone who's donated, keep it coming. Go to apscuhuru.org/donate. Put those reparations to use to build the Uhuru Solidarity Center. So I just want to give a shout out to the people watching in all the different locations. We have some people in the Yukon Territories in Canada, St. Louis, Minneapolis, Louisville, Kentucky, Gainesville, Florida, other parts of Canada, Birmingham, United Kingdom, the Zola Bantu community, San Diego, California, Largo, Florida, Southeast Michigan, Oakland, California, Seattle, Washington, Mesa, Arizona, Israel. I know Boston was in the chat as well. And we already have some comments and questions that have come in. So if you still have questions or comments, you can put them into the comment section on Facebook or YouTube or in Zoom, and we will get to them. So this is open to Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Chair Penny and Jesse. So the first question is from Kempfer on YouTube and from Southwest Michigan. They say, hello, what do you think of the American Party of Labor and the International Conference of Marxist-Leninist Parties and Organizations? What do you think of imperialism and the revolution by Hoxha? That's Hoxha. Also, did the USSR's relationship with African nations differ pre-Kershevite, can't say that, revisionism versus post-Kershevite revisionism? It's difficult to find accurate books about the USSR, especially pre-Khrushchev. Sorry, I'm saying
Khrushchev.
Uhuru.
I'm looking at, I'm trying to see that written. He's talking about, she, is it a she or he? That's question. Albania, sure. They're talking about Albania, aren't they? Kosa from Albania.
Well, Hoxha, but also Khrushchev.
Oh, and Khrushchev. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I see. And I think that I understand the question that's being raised, and I understand this whole contest, this ideological contest that happened with the Albanian revolutionary. I've forgotten how it's pronounced that name. And I know that that there are people who felt like Khrushchev betrayed the revolution, especially Stalin, and that was a great failure of the whole communist movement globally. And so, I mean, there are arguments that can be made around that if you contain the discussion, within this understanding of somehow, if you liquidate the fact that it's a colonial mode of production, then you can get involved in the discussion. If you recognize that we're talking about colonial mode of production, neither Khrushchev, nor the Albanians, nor Stalin, nor any of them recognize that. That's what I recognize. There's a colonial mode of production. And because they couldn't recognize that, they had a worldview that was very similar to the colonizers. The colonizers saw themselves and what they had produced in the world as central to the universe. And because they could not, again, we're talking this question about subjects and objects of history. And the Africa and Africans and the colonized people were simply objects of history. And you can go back, though. I would ask this comrade to get the political report to this Congress, to the plenary that we've just come out of, and read that section of the political report that deals with how the whole communist movement globally was involved in trying to justify a socialist colonialism. So, I mean, what I'm saying, comrade, is that you can involve, if you want to know about that debate, then study that debate. If you want to know about the world, study African internationalism. And that's what I would have to say, about that, I have tons of books. I have serious criticism by Mao, of Khrushchev, and I have, tons of stuff like that. All of the polemics that went toward the Soviet the Union after Stalin, but that doesn't answer the question. Neither of them are dealing with the colonial mode of production.
Uhuru, and never recognizing, I mean, specifically that African people are colonized inside the United States, inside the borders of the United States, and plays out in this, really foul colonial way of attempting to put African workers under the leadership of white workers.
Well, that's one aspect of it. But the other aspect of it is they can't even see the world connected. Mm-hmm. They just see these different places and different people, yes, and what have you, not understand that there's a global economy. Mm-hmm. At one time, even when I assumed that was a capitalist economy, it was clear that it was born globally. It was not born as something in Manchester, in England. It was a global system. Mm-hmm. And it's going to take a global response. And African people have been strategically put in those places as part of the process that constructed it, that we function sort of as a cornerstone to the entire edifice. We're going to bring it down. Uhuru.
True. Thank you, Chairman. I also want to echo what you said about reading the recent political report from the 2022 plenary. Maybe someone can put the link in the chat to read, because that will answer many people's questions just on the state of colonialism in the world. So, Uhuru, Chairman. So we have another question from a different YouTuber called Harold, who said, are there actual Ukrainian patriots who want neither Western nor Putin-based imperialism? And accepting that Biden is trash, of course, hasn't Putin acted along the lines that Peter the First laid out, Russian-centered imperialism?
Let me just tell you something that I don't know too much about Peter the First. But I do know this, that there was a process that went into creating the social system that we live under now. And that Peter the First was not a part of that process. That process came as a consequence of colonialism. I don't know where this person who is asking this question is located, where this person comes from. But you can dig in, especially if you're anywhere in the United States. You shouldn't be hard for you to find out the origin of the contradiction that we're talking about. Go across the street, go to that part of the freeway, that interstate that went through the African community. Go to the artificial border that separates Mexico from Mexico. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Peter, I don't know what Peter did. I don't know anything about Peter. I just know that this social system came into existence through colonialism. And they talk about imperialism and Putin imperialism versus somebody else's imperialism. What the hell do you know about Putin imperialism? What you know about for sure is that United States government, Benjamin Prado asked a question about summing up the 2014 coup that installed the puppet regime currently in power in the Ukraine. And of course, this happened after the government that was in power at the time rejected a relationship with the European Union and held instead for a relationship with with Russia. This was the basis for the crisis and the demonstrations and the protests and what have you. But and that led to, actually threatened this guy, the president, and pushing him out of the country. It was a coup. It was recognized as a coup. Usually what we hear from America and all these good Western guys, that they don't respect governments that came into power through coups. That's one of the lame things, except unless it's their coup, right? And but the fact is, there's nothing new about that. I mean, look at the coup that happened in Iran. Just go back, 1953. The United States government did this. Look at Honduras as recently as 2009, I think it was. Look at Libya, 2011. They create this crisis and so-called demonstrations and et cetera, and then they initiate this coup. They tried it in Syria. That's what they're still dealing with right now. They tried it in Iran. The Iranians crushed it right away. So it's not a new phenomenon. This is stuff they've been doing historically. They raised this contradiction inside a particular country, and then they ship in and they use agents, as sleepers and things like that. They call them, that they have embedded in these countries. And in Russia, right now in Russia, they've had NGO organizations. I don't know why Putin allows this. The dictator Putin, if it were me, the imperialists, their asses would be someplace else or in jail. I mean, there are NGOs right now in Russia that work for America and for Europe and what have you, promoting European and American democracies and stuff like that to pull these groups of people together. It's a common thing that the United States and all these imperialist powers have done. And they've done exactly what they said Putin has done. They create a situation like even this thing that we call Panama. Panama came into existence because they wanted to make that canal happen. They want that canal because before the Panama Canal, it was Colombia. And so what they did was that the so-called Panamanians on a part of it said, we're going to have a revolution. The United States supported the Panamanian. That's how Panama came into existence, so that they had this thing that they could dig this ditch and have the Panama Canal. It's the way they've always done it. So it's nothing new, like about it at all. And in this case, they got a bigger pushback than they normally would get. And because they had encroached upon Russian, not just spheres of interest, but security of the country. Again, this has been more than 100 years that they've been assaulting Russia. And so there's no benign Ukraine that's there and being plucked by Putin and what have you. It's been plucked already. And the plucker was US and imperialism, and Putin, I think, has decided that he's not going to be plucked. And they have imposed themselves in such a way. They have misused Russia, and they were able to do it because of weak Russian leadership up to now, subsequent to the collapse of the Soviet Union. And so Putin pushed back. And this is the thing that startled them, shook them up, because they thought they were planning a unipolar world. They were dancing in the streets under Clinton and what have you. It's a new world. It's a unipolar world. Just the United States dominates everybody. You had Fukuyama, there's one of their thinking representatives, talking about the end of history now. There's the end of history, right? We won, etc. And now I think I agree with the end of history. Be careful what you wish for. Restlessness.
Exactly.
Thank you, Chairman. So we have, we're a little bit behind, but I do want to get to, there's a couple more comments and questions. Abby on Zoom said, Uhuru is so powerful and insightful, Chairman. Another comment on Zoom from Leah in Minneapolis. She says, this analysis is so hard to come by, and I'm really thankful for it. Salute the Chairman for sharing this with us. It's so rare that we hear anything about the historical conditions that have led up to current conditions. Yet it is essential to know this history if we want to be a meaningful part of the revolutionary process. Thank you, Chairman, Chairwoman Penny, Chair Jesse, and everyone who had a hand in this webinar. Uhuru. Uhuru, Leah. Another comment from Abby. I'm so speechless when white people call themselves indigenous, as it shows a lack of historical analysis and basic understanding of what's going on. Yep, it's true. Another comment on Facebook from Paula Jane. The road to socialism is painted black. White people leading, quote, leading a socialist revolution keeps white power and white colonialism intact. It wouldn't even be true socialism if white people led a revolution. And we have a question here from Benjamin Prado. I wanted to ask the chairman if chairman can sum up the 2014 coup that installed the puppet regime currently in power in the Ukraine. And then later he commented, excellent summation. So yeah, if you could talk about that, Chairman Uhuru.
So I thought I did. I was hoping that's what you meant when you said excellent summation. I was hoping.
Okay.
But I want to deal with this question also, that the USSR's relationship with Africans. There are no African nations. There is an African nation, but pre and post Khrushchevite revisionism, as it's characterized. We had big problems. At one time, we were the party. The Atlanticist newspaper was in virtually all of the so-called Eastern European countries, Cuba, etc. And then a policy emerged, and this was under the influence of the Communist Party in the United States, because they characterized our politics as some kind of nationalism that they were opposed to. And so they were able to prevent the Brandenburg newspaper. We couldn't get to Cuba. There was a time you couldn't get to Cuba unless you went through the Communist Party USA. And you couldn't get to the newspaper, and the Cubans stopped us from sending the paper. And that happened with some of the other governments as well. I don't think this had anything to do with post or pre-Khrushchev revisionism. I just think that because I don't think this revisionism that they talked about is a factor in the struggle for Africa and African people. Not in that way, anyhow. The Soviets had pre-Khrushchev revisionism determined that there were only, I think it's 5 legitimate, authentic revolutionary organizations in all of Africa. And those were revolutionary, those were organizations that held up the Soviet line at the time, that spoke to the Soviet interests at that time. And so they funded, supported, like all of those forces, regardless of whatever else they may have represented in the world. And they were problems for us. That's one of the reasons there's an African Socialist International today. Uhuru.
Thank you. So there's another comment from Kempfer on YouTube, the one who was the first comment. I read that there have been humans traveling between Africa, Asia, and the Americas long before the 15th century. I think it was a book by Hosea Jaffe.
Say that again.
They were saying, I read that there have been humans traveling between Africa, Asia, and the Americas long before the 15th century. I think it was a book by Hosea Jaffe.
Who wrote that?
It seems like they're
Southeast Michigan.
They're staged.
Oh, sorry. Who? Kempfer from YouTube.
Yeah, there's I think there's evidence of that. I know there is evidence of that. You can see, it. You go to parts of central Mexico and what have you, and what they call Belize and all these places, you find these huge, magnificent, colossal heads. And if they didn't come from Africa, they damn sure came from Detroit. But And that was centuries before the birth of Christ, and magnificent. Yeah, so I don't doubt that at all. I don't doubt that at all. And then you see there are Black people in other parts of the Asia Pacific region and Australia and all of that who clearly, were here a long time, thousands of years ago.
And I just want to also say that the chairman has used the writings of Hosea Jaffe as basically, as I guess, scientific historical corroboration with the understanding of African internationalism and colonialism as the mode of production. And I really hope that you can read the book Vanguard by the chairman, Uneasy Equilibrium. These are available on the Burning Spear marketplace.com. And I'm not sure when the latest political report will be released by the party publicly, or if it has been, but the chairman extensively quotes Hosea Jaffe and that, and has many times in the past. But I hope you will read it and really, really understand and educate yourself about this political understanding of African internationalism and colonialism as the mode of production.
Well, listen, you hear the story about that Europeans left Europe, on this trying to find a route to India and what have you, et cetera, which is nonsense. And it's Africa. It has always been Africa. They were on the coast of Africa, run up and down. I mean, Mansa Musa came from Mali into what is now called the Middle East, and he had thousands of people in his entourage and what have you. And he gave gold to everybody. All along the way, he created a whole crisis in the economy in some countries because the value of gold was so depressed as a consequence. He built mosques and things on the way there. And this is what they were looking for. They were trying to find out where the hell that gold came from. And so they started rolling. This was one of the things that prompted them to try, to get to these different places around the coast of Africa for the longest period of time. That was the thing that motivated them. Not some map-making expedition that they were involved in, but they wanted the resources. And then we're talking about the emergence of the colonial mode of production. When you see what happened in the 1300s even, you see what was happening with looking for those gold and resources and how they began to attack different parts of Africa. So by, Uhuru.
Uhuru. We have a couple of more comments, and we will have to make number 11 the last one, so we can close out tonight. And really appreciate this.
Great. Yes. Thank you, Chairman, for that. So just two more comments. One from Amalia in Israel. Thank you so much for making this happen. Another Zoom comment.
Who is that from?
Amalia in Israel. Thanks so much for making this happen.
Uhuru.
And Angelica in St. Louis said, the perspective of the chairman's African internationalism is so crucial for looking at the world right side up, acknowledging this subject versus object thing as the relation between colonizers and colonized. I pledge $50 a month for the year of 2022 in support of the USM Solidarity Center as a one-time donation. So Angelica, that's incredible. And then this will be our final question for tonight from Nia Kumba. Uhuru Chairman, speaking of coups, can you speak to the so-called coup in Burkina Faso under Sankara? Would you call it a coup? I know that tonight's topic is not on Sankara.
Well, it is on a certain mode of operandi, if you will, of the imperialists, and they killed Sankara for sure. Sankara was a serious throne. He had challenged the entire, and Sankara, for people, Thomas Sankara was the head of state in Burkina Faso. In fact, it was he who named it Burkina Faso. I think it was Upper Volta or something like that before that, and which is the land of upright, people, and who really fought for the dignity of African people, and it was French colony. And there's no doubt that France, Campera, who was Sankara's good friend, participated in murdering him, executing him. And it was clearly one of the typical means by which they protect the colonial mode of production. They killed Sankara, and they put this murderer in power. And now it's really interesting because I think they talked about putting the murderer on trial. Now they pushed him out. They talk about trying him in some kind of court, but they put him there. Campera, it was his name. So I think it's just a part of the whole modus operandi. It's just the way the imperialists have always worked. And then they talk this stuff about being democracy and fair play, and the value of elections, et cetera. And elections are valuable only if it goes their way. If it doesn't go their way, then they are no good at all. So they killed Sankara. They murdered Sankara. Look at what happened in Honduras. I mean, you can go all across the world and see, how the U.S. in particular. I mean, they still occupy Cuba. Mm-hmm. Guantanamo Bay, that's Cuban territory. Talking about colonialism, it's nasty. It's nasty, and it's essentially white. And that's how whiteness has come to be equated with colonizer, Uhuru.
True. Thank you for that. This has been a really dynamic discussion. I just really appreciate all the comments and questions we got, and the political analysis from you, Chairman. Really powerful. So we just want to, we're almost done here. We just want to end with a fundraising update. Really want to say a big thank you to Len in St. Louis, Diane in Gainesville, Florida, Wendy in Oakland, Abby in St. Anne, Missouri, Angelica in St. Louis, Amanda in St. Louis, and Shabaka. So if we count the $50 a month pledge from Angelica through the end of the year, the total donated is $1,080. Uhuru! That's so incredible. So keep it coming. We will put these resources to work in the most incredible way at the new Uhuru Solidarity Center. So thank you everyone tonight for your questions. Before we head to announcements and conclude today's event, APSC Chair Penny Hess and USM Chair Jesse, do you have any other closing comments for tonight?
Uhuru, just really want to thank Chairman Omali Yeshitela so much. That was so profound. There is no place else that we can hear anything like this being put out. And this is so obviously the truth. This is so clear, seeing the world through the understanding of colonialism as the mode of production. It makes sense, and it gives us the ability as white people, as part of the colonizers, to be able to join the rest of humanity, not as the U.S. Army or the military front of U.S. imperialism, but to join the world and to be able to take a place under the new world that is coming, under the leadership of the African working class, the indigenous people, having their land back, which belongs to them, and the people on the planet Earth rightfully having their resources, their land, their culture, self-determination and power over their lives. That is the world that I want to be part of, and I think that you do too. And Chairman, thank you so much. That was powerful. Also want to really thank and salute Benjamin Prado from Unión de Barrio for coming on and and so many times have been on, and just a long, very long relationship with the African People's Socialist Party. So that was powerful, and thank you for the contribution that you made. Thank everybody who contributed tonight and who came on to this. Join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, join the African People's Solidarity Committee. Uhuru, the party is winning. And, want to ask Jesse to say a few things, but Chairman, I wanted to see if you had a few, any last words to contribute tonight. Jesse, and then Jesse, you want to say a couple things? And
I just echo everything that you just said, Chairwoman Penny, and it was just a tremendous honor to participate in this discussion. Thank you to you, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, for your leadership and for the profound analysis, and to you, Chairwoman Penny, and everybody who participated. The discussion was really great, I thought, and this was a really important event tonight that arms us to understand what we have to do as white people to work under the leadership of the African working class and the African People's Socialist Party and fight for reparations as the way that we can take a stand against all US war and all colonial violence throughout the world, and in solidarity with oppressed peoples everywhere. So I thought this was a great event, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to participate.
And before we go, can you just announce the USM convention coming up?
Absolutely, yes. So if you want more of what you experienced tonight, you should definitely come to the Uhuru Solidarity Movement National Convention on March 19th and 20th. If you're in St. Louis, you can join us on March 18th for a rally for reparations at the Arch, which is an infamous monument symbolizing genocide and colonialism. And we plan to be there with loud and highly visible banners proclaiming reparations to African people and no more genocide in our name. Reparationsrally.eventbrite.com is where you can get more information on that. And then that weekend, March 19th and 20th, will be the Uhuru Solidarity Movement's National Convention, Unity Through Reparations, Reparations Through Organization. And you can go to uhurusolidarity.org/register and get signed up for 2 jam-packed days of revolutionary political education from our keynote speakers, including Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Chairwoman Penny Hess, and Deputy Chair Onezene Yeshitela, and also practical work that we can do as white people to build the movement for reparations to African people under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party to a whole new level in this year of 2022. So uhurusolidarity.org/register is where you can go tonight to get signed up for the USM National Convention. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you. And Chairman, thank you again so much. And just, give us some parting words.
I just want to express my appreciation for your giving me this opportunity to discuss some of the things that we've talked about. I think it's really important to have this discussion. I appreciate the fact that we had this forum to do that and to be able to discuss the world from an African internationalist perspective. The thing is, of course, that it continues to hopefully help us to understand that there is no such thing as some kind of theory about the oppression of African people that happens in some kind of vacuum. If it's a genuine theory, then it speaks to the relationship that Africans have to the world, not just to each other, not just to white people, and how it got to be this way. I really appreciate having an opportunity to have this discussion. I also would look forward to in the future being able to say some things about Russia and China that make them both different in terms of affecting this colonial mode of production. And so I think that's that can be an important discussion, and I'm sure we'll be seeing more. I may have written something about it already. I'm not sure. I may have, but I do want to be able to do that. And so I want to thank you very much. I think it's a very important discussion. And I think that also it's a clearer demonstration, comrades, of the real practical significance of the existence of the African People's Solidarity Committee as a concrete expression of African internationalism that moves to solve problems, to take the covers off, as opposed to this tendency that happens where you have theory that cannot explain the world, and therefore, and in a way that helps to change the world, and therefore covers up the contradictions of the colonial capitalist system. But that's not what this does, and that's not the existence of the African People's Solidarity Committee does. So thank you so much, comrades. I really appreciate being here. Uhuru.
Uhuru and unity through reparations.
Right on. Relentless.
Relentless.
Uhuru.
Vanguard up.
Vanguard up.
Vanguard up. Uhuru, thank you so much.
And Ben Hameen, good to see you, Ben Hameen. Yeah, more and more. This is great discussion for the colonized to be having this discussion. We taking all the space so that the opportunists from the settlers and colonizers, we take all the space so that they are not able to define us anymore in a vacuum. Thank you so much, comrades. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Ben Hameen says, same here, comrade. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
So we are going to close out tonight. We just have a couple announcements. So first, you can hear Chairman Omali Yeshitela every Sunday morning on his show, #Omali Taught Me. This is a weekly study every Sunday morning from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Time. This is where you can get more in-depth political education from Chairman Omali Yeshitela. So you can watch it on Facebook Live, facebook.com/omali.yeshitela, or youtube.com/Uhuru TV. We also have the convention, USM convention coming up online that Chair Jesse talked about. You can register at uhurusolidarity.org/register. Number 3, we have this event tonight was White Solidarity with Black Power Live. This is a regular study hosted by APSC. It happens once a month, the last Wednesday of the month at 6 p.m. Central Time. So save the date for the next one, Wednesday, March 30th. Join us there again next month. And you can get more African Internationalist news and analysis from the Burning Spear newspaper. This is a monthly journal. It's online and in print. You can subscribe to the print or digital edition at theburningspear.com/subscribe. You can also order a bundle of newspapers to distribute in your area at burningspearmarketplace.com. And you can find out more details about upcoming events at theburningspear.com/events. So make sure to visit uhurusolidarity.org and apsc.uhuru.org to learn more about the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, the African People's Solidarity Committee, and how you can become a member to join the work to build white solidarity with Black power and unity through reparations. Thank you so much, APSC Chairwoman Penny Hess and USM Chair Jesse, and everyone for participating in this very dynamic webinar. That concludes today's event. We'll see you next time. Uhuru, unity through reparations.